Hello and welcome to the Meshworking Cities and Eco-Regions room and in the Convergence 2020. We've just finished chatting with Marilyn Hamilton about Gaia, cities as Gaia's reflective organs, and talking a lot about the Master Code of Care. And Kathryn Alexander is here with us today from Bridge to Partnerships organization, and she's going to give us a second look at this from another perspective of values, of how she's finding this leverage point really in systems of values, and how we treat that can make a big difference for us. So Kathryn's our force in the world. She works with systems and I think I'm guessing a bit with spirit and heart to work with large companies as big as Fortune 500 and departments of public works in large cities like San Francisco, and down to passionate entrepreneurs and heart passion projects with students, helping them find a way that they can create their own businesses. So I can feel the warmth and intelligence already streaming off of you, Kathryn. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to share with us today about values and how they inform city design and governance here in cities and regions. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes. Just wait 1 second. Go ahead.
Yep. It says it's disabled.
Okay, let me try. I thought I hit it. There, that's better.
Aha, here we go.
On speaker view. This is an emergent conference here at the Meshworking. So Kathryn just yesterday said, okay, put my presentation up. Okay, I'll go after Marilyn, and then seeing these connections when they're in the same room together, saying, wow, we're really talking about the same thing with different language, and let's look at how we can look at that and explore and talk together. So
thank you very much. So we don't normally think in these terms that values impact how we design our cities. I don't think that we really think much about the impact of our values. We cling to them, they become part of our identity, but we don't really see how they manifest in the world. And what is really significant for me is that values form systems. So I want to take a minute to talk about some system dynamics so that you can actually reflect on how that does show up in our value systems. So first, one of the really basic things is that all living systems have a purpose, and that's true of the value systems as well. So systems have a purpose. They are wholes. The wholes consist of parts. The parts are interconnected, and each part has an impact on the whole, not necessarily at the same time and place. And the parts aren't interchangeable. So in mechanical systems, where this is really easy to see, if you have a car, it's a whole. It's composed of parts. The parts impact the whole. If you put on the brakes, the whole car stops, you know? But with living systems, the really big difference is that when you put on the brakes and the car stops, that's a linear cause and effect. You can really see when you do something, you get a result. In living systems, that's not true. You do something and the result or the impact or the effect comes up at a different time and a different place. So it's hard to make those connections, and that's true of the values as well. So just hold those concepts as we go through this. So there are 3 systems of values. Jane Jacobs in her work posited 2, one of protection and one of effectiveness. Now this is think about the purposes. So these are the purposes of these three systems. One is to protect, to keep safe. The other one is to be effective in human interaction. And the third is to be resilient and thrive. These are very different purposes. They have different values that make them happen, and they have different intents. And as you will see, they express themselves in cities very differently as well. Each of these is an expression of a circle of caring. So the protective value set is a small circle. It is designed for us to keep us safe, whoever's inside the circle, and we don't care much about what's outside the circle. Okay, so we have different behaviors for the people inside the circle than we have for whatever is outside the circle.
It's a bell these days in the news, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, you'll see how this really clarifies some of the things we do. As we expand that circle of care, though, we start to worry about being effective with each other. So it becomes a desire, actually, to do a win-win. So it's not an us-them. It's how do we make it work? And for Jane, this came out of tribes trading. So it's the marketplace, if you will. When you work with somebody, when you want to get something from someone or give something to someone, have them take it from you, you have to be in a relationship of trust. And so these values are designed to create the context for that trust to happen. So I can't force you to do something. If I'm being protective, I'm very comfortable forcing you to do stuff. That's not a problem, okay? Because safety comes first. And when we're very basic, safety really requires a lot of energy. And and what we're now positing is negativity, but it's not necessarily. It's an aggressive way of saying I'm okay and I'm going to stay that way. But when you get into relationships, you can't force, because you can't guarantee that that force will last for very long. So if you can't beat somebody up, then they're not likely to agree with you if you're forcing them. If you're in relationship and you come to agreement, you can trust that over time. So it's actually an expansion of power. And I have a power continuum, which I don't show in these slides, but it starts with manipulation and it goes to appreciation. And so you're expanding your capacity to actually have impact as you become more subtle and more inclusive. And as we expand that circle, then we want not only us to thrive, we have discovered, and now we are really discovering, that we all have to thrive in order to make it possible. We can't have some parts not thrive and other parts thrive. The whole must thrive. So value systems form the why of what we do, the intent of those systems, and the how is what the values actually set forth. The values claim the actions that are required to make the why actually the what we get. So if you're congruent between the intent of the value system that you're using and actually live the values in that system, then the result is what you want. What is true, however, is that because values are pieces, and each of these value sets has about 15 pieces, we love all the pieces identical. And I have a presentation later today where I'll actually give people that experience. You get to measure your own values and to see what that looks like. We cherish all of those pieces and we pull them all together because we love them. And we think we can create something coherent out of this mess, really, of values with different intents. And we don't understand why, when we do things that we think we should from a value system that's inappropriate to what the why is, we don't get the result we want. So the protective value set.
Can you give an example of that one? Just ground, like the why being out of sync, or?
Yes. So we want to have a loving, peaceful world. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to be angry because I don't understand how you could possibly not. And I make you other, which means I'm protecting my turf at your sacrifice. But I want to be peaceful. So I'm not generating peace in my actions. And it's hard for somebody who feels that they have been dismissed to feel warm and fuzzy about the person that dismissed them. And yet we'll claim in language that that's what we want. But we don't see the push of these value systems. They are so tacit. And this one in particular is one that almost all of us have experienced. So the key value here is loyalty. And loyalty is often a value that people will claim very vocally. They recognize this one. They don't understand the values that flow around it. But because this is a system, then if you are loyal to somebody and you have a sudden thought that what that person or authority chooses to do is going to have a problem, your example earlier of the post. So the people who came up with the idea of the post in the street, if somebody said, it's not a good idea, it's going to block the flow, would they have been seen as disloyal? Okay, so you're not free to say your truth. Honesty does not reside in this value system, okay? Because loyalty will trump honesty. And we have these experiences, don't we?
Yeah, it was so bewildering as a growing up, like, what? Why are we doing the thing that's right? You know what?
Yes, yes, how could you not do this? Yes, yes. But you have to adhere to the tradition. You want to be obedient and disciplined in doing that. Shun trading is really interesting. And some of these are Jane's words. I have not found a better way of really expressing what she saw as so key to this. And shun trading means that you're not supposed to take money to do this. So when we talk about businesses and that kind of stuff, when you're paid to do whatever, it looks like a bribe. Okay, it's manipulation at this end of the system. It's another way of manipulating, actually. So it undercuts this, which should all come from this heart place that you really care about the authority and you trust the authority to do what's correct. So you are comfortable taking those things. You can do that with heart. When we talk about benevolent dictatorships, this is a really good expression of a well done version of this, where there is an absolute authority, but that authority cares with heart for their people. Then the actions they take, people will allow. And when they don't quite jive, when you don't feel it's quite right, you're willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because that loyalty gives you the grease to do that. So in a situation where there is danger, where people need to take care of themselves, this is a good system. It works really well. And many families are designed in this way. Okay, it's usually the father, not always, but it's usually the father that has the say, and you assume goodwill from that person because they're charged with taking care of you. And if you don't like it, then you get thrown into things like take vengeance. Bad things happen. whistleblowers are not seen as good, loyal citizens. They are pushed out of the system or punished in some way because we need to stand together. That's how we're safe. So this is the value system that keeps us together. And the us has to have them, so you know where the boundaries are. So when we talk about peace, it's hard in this system because there's always another. And the minute you are creating another, you're generating the possibility for unpeace, unrest, discomfort. And when you look at governance, you'll see that cities from this perspective are designed to protect citizens from the wild. A lot of our early cities had almost no plant life, really. If you have plant life, it's in your home, but the city itself, I mean, Italy is just caverns of cement. There aren't trees and flowers outside of buildings, they're all inside buildings. Nature is outside of the city. Inside of the city, it's all designed for human beings. So we have no bugs, no plants, nothing that interferes with what we want to do. Safety is the big principle. So under the guise of safety, you can do all sorts of things. You know, that's why we have strong rules and regulations and strong police who make sure that the rules and regulations are followed. Often cities are clean because you can force people to clean up stuff. So the force moves maybe from being physical, but to being punished in different ways. There are fines, you know, there's shunning. There are other ways to force people to behave appropriately according to what is determined by the leadership. Outside gatherings are strictly controlled. You come together for very specific purposes, a lot of monitoring, a lot of management of that. And internally, city departments are very strongly siloed. Everybody has their area and you don't infringe on other departments or other areas. So everybody works in their own world and there's not a lot of crosstalk because we're protective. I've been in organizations where you couldn't talk to another department.
Heaven forbid you share your data.
Yes, yes. I mean, it just makes you crazy. I remember working as in a call center. Now, a call center is where you get all this information from outside that says, oh my gosh, you know, this is great, or oh my gosh, this is not great. And you can't talk to anybody else. I mean, it's crazy, but it does happen because that protective sense means that it's us first and we're not so worried about everybody else. We want to keep us happy as a family. And you'll do that by not making me upset as leader. I don't want to hear the bad news. That's your problem. You deal with it, but don't tell me. Okay. And so we get cities that look like this, where they're really separated from the world around them in a very real sense. And they're very cozy. They're very comfortable, but they don't have any real resonance with what's outside of them. When we move to the effective value set, we're talking about trade. We're talking about business in this day and age. And here the central value is honesty. And that's because it's a win-win. So I need to know when things aren't working right. I want you to say, in the previous value set, it was, let's see if I can go back. Deceive for the sake of the task is at the bottom here. And you can deceive. It's not about honesty. It's not, you can lie. Lying is fine. As long as you lie to keep us safe. So there are secrets. There are things that are definitely not shared. And you'll find these in government, military, and religion. So camouflage is a lie. Sting operations in the police are a lie, and it's fine. We expect them to do that in order to keep us safe. Here, it's about honesty. Sorry, I have a cat climbing a wall. So the honesty means that we want to make this effective. Whatever we're doing together, we want to make it work. So we have to have the data that tells us when we're going off key so we can bring it back. So you have to be open, you have to be honest, you have to be able to say things to each other. And you can't do that by force. You really have to be in agreement. You have to maybe write things down so people don't forget. And the intent is to be inventive, to make more of what we have, to make it better, to have wise use, good use of resources. So thrift is really a key thing. And there's always this optimism in the market, right? It's always going to get better. We're always going to do more. It's going to grow. So growth is really important. And when you look at that in governance, the marketplace rules. So the city is designed to facilitate commerce. So you have marketplaces, you have tall buildings that say we are successful. You have fancy structures that say we are successful. You're constantly talking about the benefits of this interchange and how good you are at it. And you know that because of all the stuff, all those external things.
And we have the best mall, right?
Yes, yes. And the bigger, the better, right? It's not little malls. They got to be big malls. And they're fancy. And they have something trendy and exciting to attract people. Taxes are a big issue because you've got to support the city. And business makes money. So part of that money should flow into government and governance. And the city becomes a showcase for economic power. That becomes its purpose, basically, is saying how great we are.
Huh.
So when you look at city design, what do you see? There's nothing but the city. And it's all about spectacular, fantastic, bigger is better. So the drive, the energy is really about making it bigger. And this is I think where we are right now. We have come from being very worried about being protective to, oh, well, look, the fun things we can do when we work with each other and all of the creative stuff we can make. And our cities reflect that, but they're not human. Because we're not interested in humanity. We're interested in the stuff humanity can do. And that's the driver. And I think you're seeing this reflected also in a lot of like the singularity stuff, the very high tech, and the commitment to tech as the savior to the planet. It's just an extension of this, is that we can make more, we can do this. You know, it's all about this creativity, but there's no heart, there's no person, because we're not interested in the persons, we're interested in the expression. And our structures reflect that. And one of the things that has bothered me for decades is that when you get people to think about the city of the future, so often it looks like this, with cars and in the air, there are no people, there are no plants, there are no animals. And that's exactly where we're going. So if we move most of our world population into the city, this is what they're thinking of. And so we're actually separating ourselves more from the environment, more from our heart, more from places where we can resonate. You don't resonate with cement. Okay, it just doesn't happen. So that resonance that we need to feel grounded and to feel actualized and safe actually isn't there. So the safety gets really difficult. And again, we revert to force because people just don't feel comfortable. They don't feel safe. Singapore, and this is actually a picture of Singapore, is a very interesting place. I was talking to a resident of Singapore who came to the United States, and she resented so much the rules and regulations in Singapore, because you'll get thrown in jail if you spit on the floor, on the ground, or if you dump chewing gum on the ground. That's illegal. You cannot do those kinds of things. So it's a very clean city. But she said it's also very safe. She could walk anywhere and not worry. In the United States, she was constantly worried because she didn't feel safe, because it doesn't have that same kind of control. So that's an interesting thing to think about when we think about moving forward and designing new cities. How do we create a sense of safety? And I think the difference has to do with the intent of the value system, because if you're not protecting, and if you're not trying to make things right and perfect, which assumes there's something not right and perfect, so there's still this resistance to that, then you have to move away from things that are so human-centered. Both of these value sets are very human-centered. It's about us, making us safe, making us effective. We can do what we want to do. And there's an assumption that we are so special, so different, and so clever that whatever we choose to do, whatever we want to do, is going to make everything okay. And we're certainly starting to see the lie in that. That is just not true. If we do not expand our circle of care to include others, it isn't going to work. And we're seeing that it's not working. It is absolutely not working. So the resilient value set are actually values that reflect, mimic, if you will, how nature works. So these are the things that nature actually does to ensure that the whole ecosystem thrives. So the two main values, if we could just get these to become live, I think it would make a huge difference. Because if you're working to maintain the integrity of the whole, then you're really looking at how your actions impact others and what the effect is of what you do, and whether it's negative or not, then you have the desire to make sure that everything comes with you, everything thrives. All actions create the conditions that support life. This is from Jeannie Benyus in biomimicry. That was one of her real key insights. That is so key at a personal level. How often do we diminish people? And I mean, I do it too, so this is not a blame game. It's just we have this tendency to respond sometimes quickly and not caringly to people. I do. I get impatient or whatever, you know. And we diminish people's spirits all the time. Think children. How often we tell them to sit down and shut up instead of working with that energy and bringing it forward and valuing what they contribute. So we're taught at the very beginning that somehow or other what we see or want to do is not as important as what somebody else wants to do. So that diminishes our own trust and faith in ourselves, which we spend our whole life repairing. You know, that's a lot of the work we do as adults. So coming from a place where we really want to support and honor, respect, cherish the energy of others and learn to dance with that instead of damping it down so that we can do what we want is, I think, part of the work of the resilient value set. It is about understanding how important we are to the web of life. That's the other thing. I don't know that we really see ourselves as important to the earth. We see ourselves as important, but not necessarily important to the web of life. And understanding our role. We are the only species that I know of that sees the whole. I don't think there's any other species that understands the wholeness of our environment. If we understand that, then we have the capacity to maintain the integrity of it all. And we have certainly not exercised that because we've seen things as pieces and parts. And so we have destroyed things and figured it's just fine because the rest of it is okay. You know, but the rest of it is not, is being smaller and smaller and smaller. And we're starting to feel the pressure of that. So we are intrinsic. We are an important caregiver an important balancer in this whole creation that we have. The precautionary principle really makes people in the marketplace crazy. It's about if you see that there's a problem with what you create, that you don't make it live, you don't bring it to market until you've solved that problem. One of the biggest problems of almost everything that we touch is waste. Nothing is designed to go back into the system. We burn it, we actually take it out of the system, but we don't put it back. Nature always puts it back. It has to go back because we have a limited resource. And what keeps it alive is the fact that it's alive. It's only the lifeness of it that makes it continuous. So every time we take life away, we're actually diminishing the capacity of the planet. So the precautionary principle suggests that we take time to make sure that what we do fits in with the cycles that we're dealing with. That is part of our responsibility in managing the integrity of the whole. Dynamic stability has to do with having an area of flexibility. It's boundaries of flexibility. So river is a really good example. A river left to its own creates a meandering path, and that meander allows it to fit in and do its purpose, which is nourishing life. Water is inherent, necessary to life. And it slows that pace down so that it can actually be used. We can make it bigger and better by making that river go straight. And we have done so in a variety of places. So we get more water, faster water, useless water, because it can't nourish anything that it goes through. It goes through so fast. So it stops actually fulfilling its purpose. So understanding that dynamic stability, understanding the boundaries that work and the flexibility within those boundaries is a way to enhance and enrich. And optimize, we don't optimize, we make things bigger and better. So they're over and other. They're not enriching the whole. They're not making everything the best it could be, which means maybe you aren't as good as you could be. So it's allowing people to learn even though they're clumsy, because as they learn and gain skill, then everybody has more skills. Now you sure can do it faster and better yourself. That's absolutely true. Okay, not a problem, but you're not optimizing the whole at that point. You're not optimizing the capacity of the whole ecosystem. Self-organizing allows people to really show up, and empowerment. That's really what those two are talking about, letting people really come forward as who they are and offer the skills and the capacities that they have that they may not even know they have, frankly. And when you're in a self-organizing team, that's what happens. People just step up and do stuff. And after you've done whatever the team is designed to do, you'll hear people tell stories about how they didn't know they could do this, how what they ended up with was not anything that they thought they could do at the beginning, that they learned as they went what was possible, and it was way beyond what they thought was possible, because you're bringing what's hidden forward. You're allowing the capacity of the system to show up. So we can co-create. So, and you have to have curiosity and experimentation. So what would a city governance look like from this perspective? Nature becomes part of the city. It's not excluded. And we're starting to see that happen, especially in Europe. That there is a separation of pedestrian bike from car traffic so that there's a flow that is safe for all parties instead of conflating everything all together. In some cities, cars are blocked from the city center and from certain places so that pedestrians actually have the ability to walk. Water and parks become a high priority. One of the big issues in terms of the ecosystem is flow. Animals move, they don't sit. That's how they function, is through flow. And when we block that flow, it makes it really difficult for them to, and it really diminishes. Genetically, it starts to eliminate the interplay between in gene pools that we need to have to keep robust populations. So this is a really big concern for people who work with large parks. Large parks are nice, but they are not sufficient. So there needs to be connections between parks so that that biodiversity can be maintained. And they're going to have to flow through cities. So understanding how to manage that flow in a way that's safe, to create corridors of traffic so that animals can do that without having to cross streets. That kind of understanding means that we're integrating the city with the nature around it instead of separating it. Lots of green, the ability to grow food in the city instead of transporting it from outside into the city is a big shift. Being energy efficient and big data driven, starting to really manage. I was on a call, I don't know, a few years ago where London was talking about how to manage the grid and discovering that they had many different kinds of energy use that used electricity that weren't necessarily caught in the electric system. And that they needed to understand the other ways in which electricity was used, not just for lights and not just for heating, but there are lots of other uses for electricity, and needing that information in order to manage the whole flow. And there's a woman in Spain who is really working to understand that if you know that, then you create one system to manage that instead of lots of little systems that you try and interconnect, which is what we're doing right now. So if you create one system and you create sensors that respond to the whole system, you're actually reducing the load on the system. So there are some really strong benefits to do that. You don't need lots of places. You can centralize and have flows instead of monitoring stations. So there's some really big changes that happen when we start to think of wholes instead of parts. And so this is an artist expression of some attempts to create a more resilient city. So it is more at human scale. It's more about life. It's not so much about the ego part of us saying how big and strong and wonderful we are, which is what we're seeing in Singapore and some other cities. But it also means that it's going to spread. It has to. And in order to spread, it's got to be integrated. Otherwise, we're going to kill all life on the planet. We can't have it both ways. So we have to really start to act like we are part of the planet. So the city has to express that same capacity. So from the resilient values perspective, all actions that create the conditions that support life ensure that life continues, that we are responsive, appreciative, cherish life in all of its expressions. So it ensures we care for and support the joy of life. Life is not about existence. It's really about the thrill, the joy of living. And when you work in self-organizing teams, it is euphoric. It is such fun. I mean, I think you're getting a sense of this in the way this whole group has been put together. People are just, there's nobody in charge. There's nobody saying, you do this, you do that. People see what needs to happen or what they want to have happen, and they step up to make it happen. And then you connect. So there are kind of rules around the connection. There are some standards to make it sync, but it's not controlled in the same kind of way. And that is fun when you look back and see what you built in that kind of sort of spontaneous way. And it's a spiritual affirmation that we really are valued, that life is wonderful, that is valuable. So we're bringing and making real the spiritual part of ourselves. It's not a separate place or a separate thing we do. It connects us to the larger whole, to Earth and all of her inhabitants. It enables us to appreciate and support the essence of every person, because you begin to see how you couldn't do what you did without the diversity that you actually have to make it work. If we were all the same, you couldn't do it. You wouldn't have the skills, you wouldn't have the insights to see the whole, to see everything that needs to happen. So diversity is so key and so joyful. So it's sensitivity to the thrill of living, the thrill of being able to contribute, and being valued for the contribution that you bring. So everybody gets to truly fulfill their purpose. Both plant, animal, vegetable, and mineral, we all have a reason for being. I mean, that's what makes Earth thrive, is that every member of the community contributes. So thinking about these values, think about your own vision for your life. When I do this afternoon, you'll actually have data to reflect on, because I have a quiz that people can take. So you will see what values you cherish, and then you can begin to see the dissonance or the congruence that creates. So you want to make sure that the values you're expressing are the values that really will make the vision you have live. In your home, in your actions with other people, in your interactions with non-human life. I mean, we are so disparaging and so inconvenienced by other life often. The tree in the middle of the street, the bug that we don't like, all those things are inconveniences. And we get rid of them instead of figuring out how to allow for our space and their space in a way that's not dismissive. And we do it internally as well. We will have perfect visions of the ideal that we strive to achieve. We will define ourselves by our productivity and what we produce, not who we are, instead of just being a joyful expression of life. So it really makes a difference what value systems we choose. And now we can be conscious of that instead of being unconscious, because the protective value set is very unconscious. And the affective value set is a little more conscious, but not totally. And we certainly don't see them as discrete. And the resilient value set is so new that it has to be very conscious. We have to really pay attention to our actions in order to act that way, because it's not second nature at this point in time. So we're moving from human-centric to human relationship, and maybe if we do it right, we'll get to life-centric. If we don't get to life-centric, we won't be here. Because we won't be creating the conditions in which we thrive. We don't thrive in cities. We thrive in interactions with each other, yes. But large cities are really hard to live in. The noise, Genoa is so, people love motorcycles now and scooters because they're fast, they're noisy. You go down a street in Genoa at night in a motorcycle and the echo is everywhere. It is not a nice environment by any means. Our circle of care is moving from us, them to we, and it has to move to all beings if we're going to stay here. And our why needs to move from safety and success to thriving. That thriving has to become really the measure of our success. And our responsibility moves from my survival to everybody's thriving. Not just survival, but thriving. That ability to have a rich life is really what we're working for. And that's what will give us that same rich life that we strive for.
Kathryn, I'm on the verge of tears. Just so beautiful how you've described these values. in a way that's so accessible, and I could really hear, you know, anyone being able to listen to this and go, huh, you know, and see themselves and see their choices and yeah, and have an effect. So yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Kathryn. That was really resonant at a lot of different levels. I think, yeah, it also reminded me of something that I had mapped out, because as part of this redesigning a transdisciplinary curriculum at a design school. And so I mapped, like, post we did that, and in an evaluation, I mapped like 9 shifts that we were trying to make, which then I reframed to continuums. And some of them were, that resonated now, was going from shifting, or, you know, this continuum from strategy to value. So shifting from sort of the strategic thinking of how we can be effective in everything we do to a value-centered sort of thinking, which is exactly like you beautifully, I can't hear you, you're on mute. But that's, yeah, you expanded on that so beautifully. It just, yeah.
You can still be strategic, but it's about different things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, but so that's why I changed it to sort of continuums, but because there is sort of, you know, this thing from thinking strategically. Of course, you need to think strategically in different scenarios, but more and more sort of doing it from a value perspective, kind of. And then we were also talking about sort of from being thoughtful so moving from resourceful to thoughtful, or extractive to custodial, because we've been sort of a resourceful species, right? So we've been sort of, you know, taking resources and using them in the most effective way possible, and trying to do that. And then to go from there to this idea of being thoughtful, or, you know, this expansion of care, like you described, right? So going from the protective to yeah, the resilient. And that was beautiful. And then, yeah, also from competitive to collaborative, or, you know, analytical to contextual, because when you are in the protective, you're constantly, or in the the second one was
effective.
Yeah, you're constantly sort of in this analytical mode in the effective, right? So you're trying to analyze everything in terms of, okay, how effective is it?
Yeah.
And how can you do that? So going from there to more contextual, sort of looking at the interconnectedness, yes, and seeing the whole and not just the effectiveness of the parts. So yeah, so it really resonated a lot with me. And yeah, is the session that you're doing next, is it also on Up, or?
It's in the Evolve Up room.
Great.
And it will be
wondering if you can join, because
yeah, 5:30. Yeah, EDT. So.
Oh, 5:30 EDT. I'll see. I would love to join.
Yeah. So it will be much more focused on people and the values that you hold. And yeah, because I've developed assessments and measures. So when I work with organizations, because this reflects also your management style. Yes. So a protective value set is very much command and control, very top down, very authoritarian way of managing companies.
Yeah.
So inherent in that is this fear. And one of the problems that we have with the work we're doing is that people can resonate and say, sure, this is great. I understand it. You know, I'll get more productivity. It'll be more effective if I let people give input. Okay, I can move to that direction. And then if they're worried, if the market shifts or we have COVID or something else, it's like, oh no, we've got to go back and I've got to now tell you. So we revert very, very quickly when we have fear.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a context to actually stay in that place. It's not values driven. It's driven by fear. It's driven by the need to protect. So if we're not conscious of that, you can default. The Exxon Valdez is my favorite example of that. When they had the oil spill in Alaska, excuse me, they came to those towns and said, oh my God, we're so sorry. We're going to make you whole. Oh, we're going to fix it. Oh, how could this happen? Oh my God, oh my God. Then they go back and they go, the company's going to have to pay for that. Our loyalties to the company. We don't want to do that. And they spent 20 years working on how not to pay, spent huge money on lawyers, which is empty money, goes nowhere, does nothing, instead of putting all of that intention and work back into fixing. It's still not fixed. You know, I mean, we so undercut what we really want to do. We want to be good people. We all do. You know, and we reframe that depending on whether we're interested in being safe or interested in showing up as being special and fantastic and all of that, or wanting to have the whole thing thrive. It is a subtler thing. It is a richer thing to think about thriving. It requires way more of us, actually, our capacities and a sense of what we value, our clarity about ourselves, in order to create a thriving space. So it is a much more complex request.
Yeah, and not even really able to be seen and understood in that protective mindset.
Yeah.
It's totally dismissed as silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wasteful. Why'd you waste your time?
Yeah.
Volunteering.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I do have to run to make another event go, but it's been just such a pleasure to meet you, Kathryn. Hope we we'll try and send some more people your way to your next event. And that was in the Up Evolve room, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathryn.